Alrighty, I am here with Jack Thompson. He is a Wazoo football legend. How are you doing today?
Jeffrey, doing great. Thank you.
Of course. All right, let's just get right into it and kind of start from the beginning. You played at White Center High School, and from my understanding, you were a big Husky fan.
Well, yeah, just quick correction. I played at Evergreen High School in White Center, and grew up there. Went to school from first grade on, and yes, to the second part of that question, I grew up being a big time Husky fan.
And it was a Sony Six Killer fan specifically, or was that just part of it?
So that was part of it. And it was a big part of it. When I was growing, well, I was a sophomore in high school when he was making it big there, and I loved the way he played the position. He was unlike any quarterback, Husky quarterback I'd seen prior to that, and I was a I was a big Husky fan, as I mentioned. But then along came Sonny, and I wanted to be a Husky that much more after watching him and what he did for the Huskies.
And so, in reading a little bit about it, it kind of sounded like you were going to go to UW, but then some things happened. Can you go into that a little bit?
Oh yeah, I was going to UW. Like I said, my whole life. I came to Seattle in 1960. I was 4 years old, born in American Samoa, and so grew up in Seattle. And like everyone else, you're drinking in all things Husky. And my dad was a big Husky fan as well. And the coach at the time was Jim Owens, the head coach, and he had taken them to, I believe, two Rose Bowls. And so I grew up on a steady diet of watching the Huskies, and legends like Rick Redmond, Gene Willis, Steve Williams. The list goes on and on and on. And when I came, when I went into my senior year in high school, the story I heard was that I was known as like a lay down recruit. In other words, you don't have to waste any time, energies, or effort or money on this kid, because he's going to be Husky, and that was pretty much true. And I think they may have taken it a bit too far in that this Jim Owens, who was a legend around there, he had called and said, "Love to meet your folks. You'd like to do a house visit." And now I was really excited for that. And only person more excited was my dad, because he gets to meet Jim Owens, and for whatever reason he didn't show. And so in that really dampened the spirits. And then it happened again. And so needless to say, I was a bit down, but who wouldn't be, right? In those shoes. But I wasn't even going to take my my official visit there, but my dad convinced me to go because he said, "You never know what might happen." They they may have had a good excuse or something like that. And so I went, and sure enough, it was really tugging on my heartstrings of being there at the U. And I think we went to a basketball game, and then I was taken out to the football field, and I was really visualizing myself wearing the purple and gold. And then, as with every student or student athlete visit, football player, recruit visit, the last meeting you have is with the head coach. And I remember sitting there in front of Coach Owens, and he said, "Well, you ready to put on the purple and gold in this?" So, I just couldn't. And I said to him, "You could have done anything to me. I'd be here." But when that happened to my folks, my dad in particular, I couldn't. So that's the long and short of what happened with me. But that being said, the best decision of my life, certainly at the time, was choosing to go to Washington State. For me, it's been quite the love affair for last 50 years.
So you fully had the ability to go to UW. I mean, they said, "Hey, are you ready?" And at that moment, because of somewhat of a slight of not showing up to home visits, you decided this isn't the way you want to go.
That's how it went down. And I had an offer. I got offers from the four Northwest schools, and I took a trip to Hawaii and had an offer there. And then the very last, at the end of my, the recruiting season, I think the day before the national letter of intent, um, I got I got a call from Kansas State University offering me, and I was just I was very honored, but it was out of left field, and I just couldn't visualize, going to Manhattan, Kansas, and so I chose. It came down between Oregon and WSU, and I remember it was Coach Price who was recruiting me, and he was out front waiting. We're all waiting for my dad to get home because he worked night shift, and he'd come home at 7:30 in the morning. And Oregon and Washington State were out front, and I said, I can't make this final decision until my dad gets here. So had a on a short visit with my dad, and it was hands down the right decision.
And so I heard so I guess I have a couple questions that pertain to the Wazoo recruitment side of things. First, how did you hear from them? And then I also heard a little bit that you actually took a visit out there and your tour guide didn't bother showing up.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. There were a couple people involved with my getting recruited there, and Coach Price was the backfield coach, and he had just gotten there. He got a job offer to coach for Coach Sweeney, who was the head coach. He was at Mike Price was at UPS, and when I was a sophomore, Mike Price was kind of recruiting me then to go to University of Puget Sound, and then when he went to WSU, he took my name with him, and there's um, a big Cougar supporter. His name is Bill Kurt, and Bill was a longtime Cougar supporter, and he'd watched me in junior high and all the way through high school, and he would come to my practices, and Bill was all of 5'9", 5'8", perhaps, and he would come to my practices, and he'd be standing there as I'm running off the field and said, "You're going to be a Cougar someday." And I said, "Yeah, right. You and your dreams." And he really advocated for me. Legend would have it, he would pester Jim Sweeney. You gotta sign this kid. And this is back in the day when alums used to, play a bigger role, right? And Bill, so I'd known Bill since I was at least a sophomore in high school, and all the way through. And then after I signed, he was my real first Cougar mentor, as it were, and that was 50 years ago. And he has been a lifelong mentor of mine, and a dear friend. And his kids, Bill Kirk Jr. His kids went to Mount Rainier High School, and I'd gone over there and had dinner with the family, and Bill Kirk Jr. he was, I think, 5 years old, and he grew up to be a Coug, and graduated from Washington State. Now he's a very successful attorney in Seattle. We talk about those days a lot.
That's amazing. That's amazing. So you take your visit out to Wazoo, and what happens?
I was assigned, as with all football recruits, you're assigned to a current player, on the team, and bottom line is that he didn't show, and he didn't show up when he was supposed to pick me up. And that first night, that was there when he didn't show up. I walked the campus, and I tell this story a lot. I must have had a real lost look on my face, right? Because I had so many students say, do you need help? I said, "No, I'm just walking the campus," and they couldn't have been nicer. It's just a really great vibe that I got. And then the next morning, Coach Price asked me how to go. "Did you have fun last night?" I said, "Yeah, I did, actually." And he said, "What'd you do?" I said, "I walked the campus," and I told him what happened. He was like, he was blown away that happened. And I told him, "Don't worry about it, coach. I enjoyed myself. This is a really special place, basically." And anyone who's ever been to the campus and just, taking time to walk the campus, it's a special place. And you get the feeling really quickly, just walking and meeting the students at WSU. Doesn't matter what the year is, because students are students. They'll always be the same.
That's amazing. And so you end up going to Wazoo, as we all know, and you're there for your 4 years, and in your 4 years, you have 4 different coaches.
Yeah.
So let's start off with 1975. From my understanding, towards the end of the year, you didn't play much, and so towards the end of the year, you knew that you were going to transfer. All but in your mind, you'd pretty much made it up, and you were debating between University of Puget Sound or San Diego State University. And then and then after the game, Coach, Jim Sweeney resigns, and then you end up staying. Why?
Well, it's funny. During that time, I was in communication with one of my wide receivers, because Mike Levenseller. He and I were comparing notes because we were both going to leave. And when we heard that there was a coaching change, we said, maybe we should give this next coach a chance. Let's see what kind of offense that coach brings in. And we bagged the idea of transferring, and we stuck around. Glad we did. Jackie Sherrill came in, and with that, he brought this unbelievable passing game. And but equally as important, he brought a new offensive coordinator named Bob Leahy. And Bob Leahy was the guy that really, I give credit to for giving me that shot. And the rest is history. It's funny because in the spring of '76, Bob and I didn't care much for him as a coach. That's, because it's obvious he didn't care much for me. So, but what, as it turned out, '76 season came around, and he discovered me. So
And you had a great year, 20 touchdowns, 2.7K yards. And during this year is kind of when the Throwin Samoan actually comes around. I believe it was a spokesman review person, writer Harry Missildine, who gives you that nickname.
yeah.
And then did you think anything of that, or were you just like, yeah, this is what it is?
No, actually, with Harry and I became good friends. And Harry was he was a throwback writer. He was classic. He was funny, and he would talk to us, and he came up with the nickname and asked me, "So, what do you think of the nickname?" I saw that nickname for the first time, I believe, was the game we played against Wisconsin in Madison. And Saturday morning, when I woke up, someone said, "Look at this article," and it had my picture. In fact, this picture behind me, because that picture behind me was the game against Minnesota, the game before. And that picture was on the cover of the sports page in Madison, and it said, "The Throwin Samoans in town," or something to that effect. That's the first time I ever saw the nickname. And Harry was the one who came up with that name, and he asked me, "What do you think about it?" I said, "Well, I got to run it by my dad, and I'll get back to you." So I I said, "Hey, Dad, there's a nickname out there, Throwin Samoan," and I said, "What do you think?" And if you knew my dad, he's a man of very few words, and he said, "Well, are you Samoan?" I said, "Of course I am. Are you like throwing footballs?" I said, "Yeah, where you going with this, Dad?" He says, "Are you proud of being a Samoan?" I said, "Of course." He goes, "What's wrong with that nickname then?" "Nothing wrong with me." And he says, "I kind of like it." I said, "Okay, that's all I need to know." So I called Harry and said, "It's good with my dad. It's good with me." So
And that's awesome.
yeah, it was interesting. It is interesting because I believe more people know of the Throwing Samoan than the name Throwing Samoan. They don't know Jack Thompson. That's the weird deal. But it's fine. It's been a very interesting to be associated with the nickname Throwin Samoan.
Great. And so after your 76 season, Jackie Sherrill leaves to go back to Pittsburgh to be the head coach, where he was the assistant the previous year, I guess. And so you end up getting a new head coach in Warren Powers. Now, you had an extremely successful year the year before, so you were entrenched as the starter, and we knew this. But did you have any thoughts when you were going on a third coach in a third year that, hey, maybe I should leave to get some stability for these next 2 years?
Well, I don't remember thinking that, that way. I was too focused on doing what I needed to do, I think that in my mind's eye, that was my position and I need to, do for the team what, the starting quarterback's supposed to do. And that is, to lead and when anytime you have transition of coaches and there's that dead period between they hire the new coach. I mean, just a lot of things up in the air, right? What's gonna happen here and there, and we were fortunate. The class that I came in with, the high school graduating class of '74, to this day, it's the best class to ever go to Washington State. In that class, we had I think 8 or 9, NFL/CFL players out of that. There are 2 first rounders, me and Kenny Green. We had, a handful of third and fourth rounders. Mike Levenseller, that wide receiver I was telling you about. Oh, Mike, is one of the I'll say this, and my bias aside, he's the best receiver that Washington State's ever had, and no one tougher, not even close. Well, the next closest guy was Brian Kelly, who went on and played wide receiver for Edmonton Eskimos. He started off catching balls from Warren Moon, and see if and Brian now is he's the Steve Largent of the CFL. He's in their Hall of Fame, and we had a lot of other players that played in the NFL. I think total 10 or 11, and so it was a great class and made up of just natural leaders. And so we needed that when we transitioned from one coach to the next. There was an absence of leadership, you've grown up leadership, but not from players as we banded together, and it really uh, created a lot of bad things when it comes to recruiting. When you don't have stability like that, that class came together even more. To do what we needed to do for WSU.
And it worked out pretty well for you guys. I mean, a great leadership. You guys stuck around. And in your first 2 games, you beat Nebraska and Michigan State back to back on the road.
You-
And I mean, it felt like what I imagined was the vibes, I guess, were pretty high. You guys thought great momentum going, and you ended up finishing the season 6-5, a winning season at Wazoo nonetheless. But what was that season like starting off with such a good high?
Well, it was special. To this day, the game in Nebraska was an awesome experience because you go in and they were a powerhouse and they had 78,000 people there, all wearing red, and Warren Powers did a great job of preparing us for the what is going to be like in the stadium. And so when we woke up that morning, that Saturday morning, Coach Powers had the front page of the Lincoln newspaper, right? And it showed the Cornhusker dragging a beat up cougar, and with the scoreboard in back. I think we were like 22-point underdogs or something like that.
Yeah.
And he did a great job of getting us up for that game and getting us focused, getting us prepared to deal with that setting. And we went in and took it to them. And I'll tell you what, our defense put a great game in that game. The wide receiver I was telling you about, Brian Kelly, I think caught 2 touchdown passes that game, and enough to beat the Cornhuskers in Lincoln, and then we turned around and went to East Lansing to play Michigan State, and that was quite an experience. The thing that really irked me uh, all these years later was the third game we played. We went to Kansas, 3 straight home away games, and we got screwed. We It was a close game, and we had the ball for the last drive, and we drove the ball down to, I don't know, 20-yard line. We went for a field goal, and Paul Watson, our kicker, was a great kicker. He kicked the ball, and it comes close to the left upright, and you can tell when you're at an away game, and the stands behind the goalpost when the ball was kicked and was coming through, and everyone, they were just deflated, right? Because they saw it go in. Well, the referee underneath that goalpost said, no, he missed it. Are you kidding me? And so we lost that game. We feel that should have been a win. And, and we couldn't believe it. And that was it was the last second kick. So, but that was a special season. And with all the coaching changeovers, it was very tumultuous times at WSU, and we were just we were fighting hard to maintain and to create a base. And then the following year, Jim Walden was hired, and he did for us exactly what we needed, and that was he stayed for 9 years and did a really good job, and took us to a bowl game. And so stability. He brought stability, much needed stability, and he did a great job, frankly. Um, and he was the coach. I redshirted a year, so I was at WSU for 5 years. So the class that I came in with, the class of '74, high school class of '74, they graduated in '78, and so I played my senior year, and that was my fourth coach, 4 years with Walden. Um, I I wasn't sure if I was gonna come back for that senior year, my redshirt senior year, and, unless we had the right coach. Now, Coach Walden was the offensive coordinator that junior year, um, and he was elevated to the head coaching job, so there wasn't gonna be a change in the offense. So I was tired of my school getting used as a stepping stone. And, I know that, I've not told the story much, if at all, in public, but my good friend who's returning, after, the season of '78, he did he he called a lot of, teams and networked, and if I would have come out at, the same year as Mike Levenseller and Brian Kelly, they were projecting me to be, a mid first round, the draft pick. And so it was a decision we had to make. But when Walden was hired, it took away that element of as far as change of systems, offensive systems. And again, I just felt like I needed to come back the senior year. At different times back then, I mean the dollar they're throwing around nowadays is just crazy, but just different times.
The dollars are definitely crazy nowadays, but from my understanding, when you guys had Jim Walden your junior year as well, redshirt junior year, he allowed you to kind of keep throwing the ball around like you had done your redshirt sophomore year. So going into that senior year, you knew, okay, I'm gonna keep slinging it around. Did that play into your mind? Okay, I'm already a projected mid round first. If I can keep up this pace, maybe I can get be the first pick in the draft. Or were you just you knew in your heart, I gotta return?
No, it's really more in my heart. And I got to return. It's amazing. Again, this is something I'm not really gone public with it, but this friend of mine, I was telling you about the attorney friend. His name's Carl Lopez, and Carl was like my big brother. And we had a lot of heart to heart talks. That after my junior year, and he asked me, he goes, what really gets you about the situation that's happening in Washington State? We lost, our head coach, and we didn't know who was going to get hired. And I said, Carl, it just pisses me off what these coaches have done. It just, and for them to do it to WSU. I remember, this conversation, and I said, and then he asked me, where you can live for the rest of your life? I'm thinking, where's he going with these things, these questions? I said, well, Seattle, you know that. And he confirmed, my experience at WSU. Have you enjoyed it there? I said, of course I have. You know that. I mean, it's a great place. And now think of this. Hughes ultimately was my agent, right? And in fact, he was an agent for a couple of the guys that went pros. My that season of '78 is the agent for Don Schwartz, who went to New Orleans, and so he could have talked me into going easily. But what he said to me was, you know what, you should stay. If Walton gets the job, you should stay. He goes, because the X factor here is the Cougs will never forget it. And he's right. I think of the two players at Washington State this past year, Brennan Jackson and RJ Stone. Now these are different times. I said this already, NIL money and the whole bit. And they were getting courted by a couple of the schools. And, they're looking to drop, high six figures on them to leave. But they opted to stay. And I don't know which one it was, RJ or Brendan. One of them said, no, I wanted to get my degree from Washington State, and I want to finish what I started at Washington State because that, it's special. And I'm thinking, boy, shades of back when I was. And, the other thing that it speaks to highly of their parents. Their parents, they didn't just grow up thinking like this. I mean, they were brought up special, to be thinking about loyalty, be thinking about, stuff like this. And because I would tell you 9 out of 10 other kids would not. But it speaks to the special place that Wazoo is. And I think that as we go further in today's game, that's the kind of thing that Coach Dickert is recruiting towards. He's creating a culture and making kids realize that, hey, NFL is fine. It's great, right? It's something to aspire to, but it's special to get a degree here. And because the alums will not forget it. And that's the truth. And I told that to BJ and RJ, you'll not forget this. So best decision, again, best decision I made in 1974 was going to Washington State. Staying was it was another great decision, was to stay.
It worked out super well for you. You have another amazing year. You end up finishing ninth in Heisman voting, which is amazing. What did being up for such a prestigious award like the Heisman mean for you?
Well, for me, it was just bringing, it was shining a light on Washington State, So for everything that was happening to me, it had added punch because it's, is Washington State and the Cougs. And so I welcomed it, and it was a neat experience. Going into my senior year, my redshirt senior year, I was selected to go on a national tour. This is back when ABC was a big, college network, and the great Keith Jackson was, the highlight of that tour. And so I was able to go with 5 other All-Americans, and we toured the country. We started in New York, and went to Atlanta, New Orleans, I believe, LA, of course, Cincinnati, LA, and then finished in Seattle. Yeah, that was a great experience. And, like I said, everywhere I went, it's like Washington State University. And up until then, we didn't have a lot of players to bring that kind of spotlight on our university. Well, so ever since then, I mean, Steve Waddell, we've had our fair share of great players, from Drew Bledsoe to Ryan Leaf, to, you name it, Luke Falk, and great. I'm just meant to be quarterback, but basic guesser, you name it. We had some really great players. Gardner Minshew, so it's it does my heart good to see that.
And I think a lot of people, if they would, I think a lot of people would give you a lot of credit for that, right? Yeah, I think you definitely helped put Wazoo on the map, so to say, and made it a place that is attractive to others. And as that happens, stones get put on top of each other, and you build a program up. And I think you had a lot to do with that.
Well, and thanks for that. There has to be a beginning, right? It's a start for things like that to happen, and I'm very grateful to to have been in a position to help, kickstart that, if you will. We have had prior to me. I mean, you had Keith, Lincoln, guys who were there before I was there, I mentioned Keith Lincoln because he was a great running back who went on and played with the San Diego Chargers, and he was like my surrogate father. He was working at Washington State at the time. He was the director of the Alumni Association, and he took me under his wing, we're so fortunate. I mentioned a mentor of mine, Bill Kirk, and then Keith Lincoln. I'm just so lucky to have met great men like him.
Cougs looking out for Cougs.
Absolutely. It's in our nature. I mean, we always do that.
So overall, in 4 years of Wazoo, you set multiple records. Some of the highlights: most passing yards in NCAA history at the time, third in all-purpose yards in NCAA history at the time, and a three-time All-American. So your 3 years as a starter, All-Americans just right off the bat. And this leads to the pros, where you get selected third overall by the Cincinnati Bengals. Now, if I'm not mistaken, you were originally kind of told by the Giants, hey, if you're there at 7, you're our guy. And
Yep.
pick at number 3 was completely unexpected. Was it unexpected to you?
Oh yeah, that came out of left field. They were projected to, the Bengals were supposed to draft, or prognosticators were saying that the Bengals were going to pick Kellen Winslow, who ended up going to San Diego Chargers, and for me, I was looking forward to be selected at 7 to go to the New York Giants. And Ray Perkins was the head coach then, and he came to Pullman, took my then girlfriend and I out to dinner, who's now been my wife all these years. That was another great thing that took place that happened at WSU. And uh, so Coach Perkins came out and took me and Molly out to dinner, and he just flat out said, had your bags packed, come 7th pick, we're picking you, and I want you there the next day. I said, I'm ready. Well, we fast forward to the draft day. I was at my mom and dad's house. The draft began at 7 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, and so we were just kind of milling around. Wait a minute. Oh, how was it? 9 o'clock? No, it was 9 o'clock Eastern Time, 6 o'clock Seattle time, right? It was in the morning, early morning. So we had a lot of relatives and friends at my mom and dad's house in preparation. We had breakfast and the whole bit, but we were looking to get drafted, at 6:35, and because that's they had each first round pick 5 minutes or something like that, right? So 7th pick, yeah, so 6:35. And, call came, like, around 6:15. Actually, you know what? It was, it was, like, 10 o'clock AM Eastern Time, 7 o'clock our time, okay? So, at around 7:15, the phone rings, and, it was a woman that said, "I'm calling from the Cincinnati Bengals," and I thought it was a joke. And we had a TV camera in our house, from Channel 5, news, and they weren't even geared up yet, and then they realized, oh, this call has taken a turn. This is interesting. So they turn on the camera, and I was still kind of perplexed, and I remember the camera guy said, "Smile, you're getting drafted," and so it was nice. I put on a good face, and she says, "Here, let me Coach Paul Brown would like to talk to you." And I said, "Wow, this is getting real." And sure enough, Coach Brown gets on the phone and says, "Congratulations, Jack." And well, then I realized that I was not going to New York. I was going to Cincinnati.
What a wild turn of events to say the least.
Yes, it was, but, it was a great experience for me to go to Cincinnati. Made a lot of good friends, and we went to the Super Bowl. I wasn't the starter then, but, it's still a great experience nonetheless.
Yeah, and so your rookie year, you were brought in, and the idea was Ken Anderson was play of the year, from my understanding, and you would learn and then be the guy. And so you ended up starting a game that year. You throw a touchdown. You have 116 rushing yards and 5 touchdowns. Things are looking good. And then 1980, the Bengals draft Anthony Munoz, and I'm sure you're ecstatic, going, "Hey, I got a great blocker now. This is going to be the guy." And it worked. You start 4 games. You only took 13 sacks the whole year. How was that kind of feeling after your rookie year and your first year in the league, or second year, I guess, technically? What was the feeling? How were you feeling?
Well, I felt really good about my chances, and, we you can tell we were putting together a good team. And when Anthony Munoz was drafted, boy, they really took a turn for the better. And he made a big difference in our offense. I mean, that he's the best football player I've ever played with. And more importantly, I, I consider a good friend. And then the next year, the third year, they drafted, well, Chris Collinsworth.
Yeah,
On
might have
four.
heard of.
And I was really competing for the job. Had good games, my second year. Then going in third year, we had Kenny and I were going back and forth, and I had a good preseason. And Coach Greg told both of us that whoever has the best game, this game is the last game of the preseason, will be our starter for the season. And I was licking my chops. And first half, Kenny started, did so. I came in, and that game doing. I was having a really good preseason, and that was no difference. I'm doing well, and I got flushed out of the pocket. And as I ran out of bounds, their linebacker dove at my ankle, and he clipped me, and I sustained a really a bad high ankle sprain. And that effectively put me out for 4 weeks, 5 weeks. And in the meantime, Kenny he was at a very low time confidence wise. The first game where he started, he got pulled because he just wasn't having a good game. And Kirk Schoner came in, who's the third string quarterback, and led us back to victory. We beat the Seattle Seahawks. So the second game, I believe the second game we were playing against New York Jets, and the big question: who's going to start? Who's going to start? And as memory serves me, I'm in the meeting room. I still wasn't able to play, and Kenny walks in. And he goes, if this something to the effect of um, um, if this team owes me anything, it's I need to start or something of that nature, right? Um, and I looked at him. I said, "Wow, then why don't you go talk to Coach Greg?" He did, and he started he started that game against New York, and led us to a victory, and then ultimately led us to the Super Bowl. And he was the MVP of the year of the NFL. I mean, I was able to witness, in my opinion, Kenny belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. I mean, his credentials warrant that, and he took us to a Super Bowl. But he helped establish Cincinnati Bengals as a bona fide NFL team, because up until then, it was kind of iffy. You were just one of those um, teams, that bottom tier team. But Kenny solidified our station as a team.
And that same year, you play in what is one of the coldest games of all time, dubbed the Freezer Bowl against the Chargers. What was that like?
Scary. In a word, it was scary. Uh, I went out, and, our head coach, Forrest Gregg, played for the Green Bay Packers, and the coldest game prior to that game was the Ice Bowl, I think they called it, Dallas against Green Bay in Green Bay, and that's when Forrest was playing, and it was like 15 below zero. I forget what the temperature was, and Forrest, he was a man's man. He took no crap from anybody, and we just felt like just follow what Forrest has to tell us, follow his lead. And we did. And he said, mind over matter. Well, as I was running out of the locker room, out to the tunnel, and out onto the field, I'm thinking, mind over matter. And when I went out on the field and I took my first full breath, I felt like I was swallowing a ball of needles. It hurt. And you think about it, it's anything that's wet instantly freezes, right? And that was my first experience. And I remember looking up to the right as I was running out. I think there were two guys there that didn't have a shirt. They didn't have a shirt on. It's crazy. And one of those guys died. It was scary. It was really, really scary. And to this day, I'm thinking, would the NFL ever consider, postponing a game like that? But they chose not to, and we played, and it was anybody who played that game. It took a hero, both San Diego and Cincinnati. It was a heroic effort, and I tip my hat to my teammates who played the whole game. In those conditions, I went in for two plays. One was a handoff to Pete Johnson. Another was just to roll out and I hit him in the flat. It was like throwing the football was like unlike anything I'd ever experienced. It was like shot footing, a frozen brick, and that's how I felt.
Negative 59 wind chill do that.
Yeah, it did. It did. It was scary, in all caps. Then I think Dan Fouts, in his remembrance of that game, remembering the game, I think he saw a corpse, in the as they're going off the field. He was on a what do you call it? One of the stretcher
Oh, gurney.
covered. A gurney, right. I could be wrong, but it's something like that. Someone saw that that poor guy, and so, God, he was just crazy. And, the week before that, San Diego Chargers played Miami in that epic game down in Miami where, it was like 83 degrees, and they won. They had to, practically carry Kellen Winslow off the field because he was just spent, and he caught a ton of passes. But it was you go from there to 59 below, you tell me. Oh,
Yeah, it's a 70-degree swing. I don't think anybody wants that.
no, no, not at all. Actually, more than 70 degree. You go from 83 plus to 59 minus. Holy cow. So those poor guys.
And so you win this game and you realize you're going to the Super Bowl. I imagine you were like, great, let's get to the locker room. I'm freezing. But being able to look back on it now, what was that feeling like?
Well, for those of us who weren't playing the whole time, we had the benefit of, being able to kind of sit. They had those benches with the heaters and stuff like that, and you could wear the big coats, whatever, and so. But the guys who were playing, wow, it was just like I said, it took a heroic effort. But after the game, I don't remember much about the actual. That I just remember, getting my butt into the locker room and staying in that warm shower as long as I could. But that morning when we woke up, we were at a hotel north of Cincinnati, and a lot of our cars wouldn't start. And there are some of us that, God, I got a ride from someone who was working at the hotel, and they said, "I can give you a ride down," and that's how I got down for. So I don't know how everyone got down there, but we made it, and the time to spare.
I mean, crazy things are happening all the time.
Crazy things, yes.
And so the Super Bowl, unfortunately, guys end up losing 21-26. But you put pressure on San Francisco, scoring those 21 points in the second half,
Yeah.
and doing all those good things. And so 1982, you don't play much for the Bengals, and after the season, you end up getting traded to the Bucks. And in '83, you play super well on an individual level, but the team struggles going 2-14. Was there any feeling of doubt for your own success at the NFL level at this point, or did you still feel like I got it? We just had a struggling year.
It's more the latter.
Okay.
You know, it's just trying to uh, trying to figure out how you stabilize your own situation at the same time. Um, helping the team. It was a new team for me. It's a different team. Um, it was a time when traded to get they traded for me, and I was an insurance policy, if anything, for Doug Williams, and Doug got in a big fight with management, and he left. He went to the USFL, and I was with a team that didn't care much for me because they just lost their leader. I get that, right? And Doug was all that, but just trying to pound it out, do what you can with what you got. And as it turned out, it just didn't work out. Um, Ended up losing my starting job to Steve DeBerg, who did a good job, but it's the nature of the business.
And so in '84, the Bucks draft Steve Young in the supplemental draft, and we all know kind of how that goes. And so after starting 5 games that year, you decide to retire. Why? And how did you know? Why did you retire? And how did you know you were done in the NFL?
Well, it was after I was making the rounds, visiting teams, to see if I can get on another team, and it was really I was in Buffalo, um, and and as it turned out, the offensive coordinator of Buffalo, or the quarterback coach of Buffalo, was Bob Leahy, my offensive coordinator, who gave me a shot at WSU, and and when I was taking my physical, which you had to do with every team that you would visit, the doctor and I had a good talk, and he says, "So, did you get your degree?" I said, "Yeah, I got it in business." And he was just kind of probing, and he goes, "I don't tell this to many people, but you know, I've evaluated your X-rays and all the tests that we do." And he said, "Maybe it's time for you to consider taking advantage of your degree." And he said, the way I remember him putting it, he goes, "Yeah, you can play. You have 8, or what, 5 more years, or
Yeah.
but I will tell you this." And he asked me if I had kids. I said, "Yeah, I have 2 boys. And do you want to play with them?" And I said, "Of course they do." He goes, "Well, if you continue down this road, your left knee is pretty bad. And come when you're 35, 40 years old, it's going to be problematic." And I've seen it. I've seen it many, many times. And so, I got to thinking about that, and um, now I'm thinking maybe it is time to hang them up and start my life as a non-football player off the field. And that's essentially how that came down.
That is definitely an interesting story for that. And since then, much success off the field in many different endeavors. On the athletic side, you get your jersey retired at Wazoo in '87. You're inducted into the Wazoo Hall of Fame. You were a part of the inaugural Polynesian Hall of Fame football class in 2013, I believe. Somehow, some way, through all this, the accolades, ninth and Heisman, all these different things we've talked about, you're not in the college football Hall of Fame. I don't know how the heck that happens, but does that bother you at all?
Well, I that I'll be lying if I were to tell you it doesn't bug me, because when I was when I was playing, I go back to Bob Lately, right? He installed an offense that did not exist in the Pac-12, in the Pac-8 at the time. Okay, I mean his offense was extremely different, and that was the year that offenses changed in the Pac-8 forever. Because prior to that, the Pac-8 was, a running offense. I mean, running conference. In fact, you go back not too much further back when I was a sophomore that year, but that was season of '76. You go back to the season of '73 and '4. UCLA was running the wishbone. They had Mark Harmon, they were running the bone, and Oregon State was running the wishbone, and it was 300 yards in a cloud of dust, but Bob changed everything. And it was the first time you ever seen an offensive set with 5 wide receivers. And one thing that never happened before that, we went in the shotgun. We were playing against USC in the Kingdome. We were in the shotgun, and Dan Dornick, who was my running back, he went in motion and leaving me, with a quarterback with no backs. That was unheard of. It all started back with Bob, and Coach Leahy would communicate with a guy named Mouse Davis, who was the one of the initial guys in the run and shoot. Right, he's down at Portland State. So Bob Leahy was talking to this guy Mouse Davis all the while, kind of like a mad scientist, right, concocting all these crazy things, but it changed the landscape for the Act 8 moving forward, because after that, I mean, so you mentioned earlier, I held the record for most yards passed in a career. Okay, prior to that, the record was held by John Reeves, who played at University of Florida 10 years prior. So his record lasted for 10 years, then I broke it. And then from me to the next person who broke it, it was a year and a half or 2 years. And then it was broken every year after that. So now if you throw for 7,800 yards, that's one season, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so my thing is that I was fortunate to have played in a system that helped change the landscape of offense. And, the fact that, when I was growing up, there were no colored quarterbacks, and then let alone black quarterbacks. I mean, Doug came around and broke a lot of barriers. But I like to think that I helped break a couple barriers too. I wasn't white, you know, it's still not white, but those are the things that I am very proud of, because it was significant at the time, and it helped raise the bar for um, Polynesians. After that, to your point, I mean, I serve as the chairman of the selection committee for the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame. And I got to tell you, Jabri, I'm glad I got in when I did, because it has only gotten tremendously more difficult. Because every year, the backlog of deserving Polynesians grows exponentially. And, I know that I was part of the initial wave. No, the initial sustained wave. There were a couple, here and there, Bava Pisa, Wilson Famana, Mosi Tutupu was same high school year as me, but I'd redshirted and I came out the year later, and I was with Lani Tuisopo, Frank Manamaliuna, and so there were little ripples, but now it's a frigging tsunami of Polynesians, and so from a timely standpoint, like I said, I'm fortunate that I got in when I did, because it's really difficult now.
Well, I think being a trailblazer, and you definitely broke barriers as well. I think you still would have gotten in. I'm not too concerned about that one. But it is amazing to see the Hall of Fame selection committee now and just kind of the people getting in every year. It's amazing. And so as a Wazoo alum, I don't think anyone doubts Wazoo alums doubt just how amazing you are and how fans look at you and your presence around the school. What's it like to still be so active with Wazoo? And then on the football side of things, what have you noticed as coach tenure changed between Paul Wolf, Mike Leach, Jake Dickert?
It was difficult, when, during the Paul Wolf years. I mean, I'll be the first to say that, but I also will say that Paul Wolf was a good man, and he's a great kook, but I believe he was thrust into a position, where he didn't have the support that he needed to be a great coach. I think it would have been great if he would have had an opportunity to, say, coach under Mike Price at the D1 level. That would have been great because he was coaching at Eastern when that happened. I can understand why that decision was made, but he's kind of, behind the 8 ball. And then Bill Moose was hired, and he made the key hire that changed the fortune of Washington State football, at least, in the last 15 years, and that's hiring Mike Leach. I mean, that was a major get for our university, because with Coach Leach, he brought, I was talking about that spotlight, when I was going through it. I mean, he brought, not a spotlight, but just what a spotlight times 10, right, onto our school. And ESPN wanted to know, what did Leach say here or there? I mean, everyone wanted to know what Coach Leach had to say because he's such a special guy. And, he and I became friends, and I was a big time Leach supporter. And it's unfortunate what happened with, Coach Rolovich. He had to do what he had to do. One of his first calls, he's funny that we're talking about Leach, but the day that I heard that Leach left, and I always wished him well because, when he went down to Mississippi, I mean, he got choked up talking about Washington State because, again, he knew what a special place it was, but he had this burn in his saddle that to coach in the SEC, right? God bless him. And so that day that I heard, I get a call in that morning, from Coach Rolovich to advocate for him. And I had known Rollo, and I did. I had no problems with that. And it's just unfortunate how that thing turned out, beyond anybody's control except for our governor. It is what it is. And but with Pep Chung, he selected Coach Dickert. And I will tell you that I'm a big Dickert fan. I'm very happy. Talking about a real fit, he fits Washington State to a T. At Washington State, we've always had coaches that were very colorful, very, like Coach Price, Coach Walden. I mean, Coach Walden, I think Coach, James, okay, Coach James at UW. It was a great quote. I'm a 10,000 word underdog to Jim Walden, or something of that nature, right? And Coach Walden, man, he's a quoting machine. And Coach Erickson, he was a bubble off a plum too, just a character in the best way. And then along comes Coach Price, and he took it to another level. Just really cast the characters, good ones. Coach Dickert is not that way. I've likened Coach Dickert to, he's kind of like the Tony Bennett of football. Tony Bennett was raised in Wisconsin, just like Coach Dickert. They had those, that kind of background, hardworking. All the other coaches are hardworking too, but just that work ethic that comes from the Midwest. But Coach Dickert really gets Washington State University and the uniqueness that it is and what it provides for players and people, young people. and that's what he's coaching towards and recruiting towards. So he has no problems in recruiting to Washington State because he recruits the uniqueness that exists there. So I'm really so grateful that we have him as a coach, and he speaks his mind. During when everything went to heck in a handbasket, with the Pac-12, he he did not sit, you know, off in the corner. He spoke his mind, and he was eloquent in the way he told people what he was thinking about in terms of, what we need to do as a team. And he's a fighter. He's a kook.
He's got him ready to play, and some of the it's been impressive to watch him, right? Yeah, win his first year when he takes over as the interim coach. You end up going there and getting a win. You go into Madison, Wisconsin, you get a win. People are thinking maybe it's a fluke. Like Luke Fickell's named the Wisconsin head coach. They come to Pullman. He still has the guys ready to play. Gets another marquee win. Takes UW to the brink this year. I mean, frankly, being at the game, I thought Wazoo should have won, but for what is what it is.
You take your hat off to the dogs. That call where they went for the fourth down. I saw 3 holds on that call, on that play. Are you kidding me?
Our West own magical pass interference. Or sorry, roughing the passer, but
Yeah, give me a break. And what Cam got, in that game was 10 times work. But it is what it is. I got to tell you, you can get me going on that whole Pac-12, the dissolution of the implosion or whatever you want to call of what happened. I get pissed off just thinking about it. You know, uh, the our friends at UW, their president in particular, you know, I had issues with what she did, you know, as far as leaving to the Big Ten. I kind of get it, but it's how she did him.
yep.
Then is just gets me, you know. And I scratched my head in terms of, how the powers that be at UW and can ride with that because, the people that were chirping at her in her ear at the time, oh, we got to get out of here, were her AD and her head coach. And what happens? They bag her, I mean, how does that square? And, at that time, that's when you need a leader, to step up and to show vision. And plus she was the one of I think she was still the chairman of the executive council of the Pac-12, and she knew that things were going on in the background, but didn't let on. Anyways, I can go on. It just picks me out thinking about it, but it is what it is, and I applaud the way Washington State University and Oregon State have handled themselves. Grateful for President Schultz and Pat Chung for the leadership that they've showed through this time. I mean, talking about navigating treacherous waters. Oh, but we'll land on our feet. Cougs always do.
They always do. Uh, I'll keep you off the Pac-12. It sounds like you're very fired up about how you talk about it. I did have a. I am down to talk about it if you are, but it's up to you.
Fire away.
All right. Well, I'm going to go straight into it then. I have so many questions and so many different reports that have been said. At one point, I heard Klavnov, who actually I don't know if you've already heard, but he just got fired today.
Right off.
Yeah.
Well, he had one job, and it didn't happen. And, that's it doesn't come as a surprise to me. And I had held out a lot of hope for him navigating us through these times, and it is what it is.
I heard there was a lot of calls. I heard at one point there was a talks of, and you would know better than I will, but at one point I heard there was a talk with the Big 12 of possible absorption of the Pac-12, and saying, "Hey, take everyone except Wazoo and Oregon State," which I thought was awfully shady. I guess is the only way to really put it. Very interesting.
Darby, let me just put it this way. I don't know if that happened. I will just say that if it did, screw you, you know? it, yeah, that's, I don't know. Like I said, I don't know if that happened, but, if it did, then should have been fired before. Now, I got to tell you, I look at it now. Hindsight is 2020, right? But you look at it now, and so let's think this one through. Apple. Apple was talking about, we want to take streaming to another level. Think about that. One of the biggest companies in the world. They had in their back pocket, in their wallet, dollars that they can buy ESPN and Fox tomorrow, right? So if they're gonna say, let's team up, let's make this a go, and they gave us a general contract, what was it's like 29 million per team, and if with incentives and stuff. But they said, I think in there too, they said they were willing to pay X amount of dollars to market. Do you think Apple is one of the best marketing companies in the freaking world? Are you kidding me? To me, I use this term all the time. It's a no-brainer. I'm going to hitch my head wagon to that. If I had a partner like that come and talk to me about, hey, we can do this. Well, guess what? I'm all in. Particularly at the risk of dissolving a conference that's 100+ years old, and all the tradition and all that, and allowing my players to play regionally, right? And you can team up with one of the best companies in the world. Do you think they're gonna let that fail? I don't think so. You know, and it surprised me that Nike didn't jump in on that. You have two brands, Nike and Apple. They can make this thing happen. And so it was a dearth of leadership. And again, I go to University of Washington because I'm a taxpayer, and I grew up loving that place. Are you kidding me? You're gonna let this history go down the tubes with and take half a share of this new conference? It just blows my mind. And then again, what they did is bad enough for me, right? But how they did it, that drives me nuts. And the lying that went on, and again, with every passing day, every passing month, and the stuff that would come out of the case, the court case that's public um, review, and it makes both our schools look that much better, right? That they carried themselves above the fray, and I'm proud of that. And again, it goes back to why do I have this love for Washington State University? It has a lot to do with that, in how you try to comport yourself on a day-to-day basis. And I'm proud of what President Schultz and Pat did and how they did. Now it's not going to be easy, of course not. But I hope that when the dust settles, I hope a company like Apple can take note of that. We may not be as big as you worldwide, but you can bank on us.
And I think,
And
go ahead.
yeah, no, I'm just saying that we're two institutions of integrity, and that's worth a lot. And you look at our TV numbers. People, this brand, the Cougar brand. I see it in the back behind you. That logo, that brand is worth a lot, and for a reason. I mean, not the least of which you would see it every Saturday mornings. Waving proudly, and it stands for something. And I just hope that someone in Apple can say, we can bank on it. Easy to make those guys the America's team. You know, so
So what do you
that we're wishful thinking coming out.
it's good wishful thinking. What do you think? This is the last time I'll ask about the Pac-12, and then I got some quick questions so I can get you out of here. But what do you think is the future of the Pac-12? Do you think the next step is rebuilding it, getting some more schools to come in? Do you think absorption to the Mountain West? I've also heard, and I've thrown out, it'd be cool if we could go back way back when to the PCC, Pacific Coast Conference, get Montana, Montana State, Idaho, bring them all back up to the FBS level and pot up regionally and kind of go about that.
I think the realities of that last scenario you're talking about, it because the TV dollars are almighty, and that's where I was kind of going down earlier. WSU, our marketplace isn't Pullman. It's not Pullman or Eastern Washington. It's national, and we do really well compared. If you were to throw us right now into the Big 12, we would do extremely well. We'd be in the top third, top quarter, compared to all the other teams that they have there. We again, it has to do with this brand. They people tuning in, they see the brand, they see Washington State's playing. Hey, let's chime in, and it proves itself in the numbers that we drop it. And so, I don't think there's a possibility of the PCC just because the nature of the TV dollars, as it were. And I'm not, I don't favor the Mountain West option. I have good thoughts about reconstituting the Pac-12. I've heard that a lot of the teams that had left are having second thoughts. I think the potential implosion of the ACC, if that were to happen, Florida State wins their lawsuit, and that will be a major game changer because then ACC will falter, and then you watch the dominoes fall from there, right? And you have two West Coast teams, arguably the smartest teams in the Pac-12, making what I would call a dumb move. I mean, how does that figure? How does that square for your athletes? But you know what? I'd welcome them back. You know, uh, no problems at all. And I used to be a big time Stanford fan. My nephew Tavita Pritchard was the quarterback for them and offensive coordinator. So I love Stanford still. I hear UCLA's, that's not a given deal. Yeah, and I would welcome them back with open arms. So the reconstituting, or whatever however you want to describe it, of the Pac-12, I like that. Frankly, I'm all for it. But at the end of the day, with the Big Ten and the SEC, talking whatever they're doing behind closed doors, and doing a super conference or whatever, I want in because I believe we belong in it. God knows college football needs institutions of integrity. And I think Oregon State, Washington State, notwithstanding, the competitive side, okay, because we are competitive on a lot of different metrics, but we need to be there. And I believe we deserve to be there. But that's my opinion.
I believe a lot of people would agree with you. A lot of people at the national level would agree.
Yep, at the NACFA level, which is the most important. And again, I go back to the Apple deal. Come on, Apple, you're known for doing some special things, and thinking outside the box. You can do this. I, I, I'm still scratching my head how they would blow that deal up. And now, in light of ESPN and Fox talking about streaming, right?
Warner Bros. As well, joining all together.
Come on, and Apple can buy them all. But the point of it all is that, we could have been that classic test tube for them, just no vision, man, no vision at all.
All right. I got some good Coug questions to lighten you up, and then 5 questions we ask everybody at the end. So, you are widely considered the best Wazoo quarterback of all time. I'm putting you on the spot. You can pass on this if you want, but who would you say are the other top 5 quarterbacks in Wazoo history?
Oh, Jesus. That's tough, but I'll take a swing at it.
All right.
Okay. Ryan, Drew, and I'm not talking one or two here. I'm just saying, just naming names. Okay. Um, Luke, all-time winningest QB. One of my all-time favorites, Jason Gesser. Just being straight out. He was one of the courageous players. I saw him playing with a friggin' broken foot almost his senior year. And I'll never forget that. And he carried that team on his back for 3 years. So, uh, the fan favorite is Gardner, of course. But the reason why, I'm not going to throw him here because he had a 1 year run, and if he would have been there, oh gosh, can you imagine what he would have done? He would have been there for 3 years. He'd run for governor when in Washington. So, well, I was so grateful for what he did for our school.
Came into a really tough situation.
Yeah.
And he really elevated it. And now he's the NFL's fun guy and people love him, but I think it's understated just how much he did for that team and came in and was amazing.
Well, the beauty of that was, it's not just what he did for our team. Yes, he did a lot for our team, but what our team did for him. Think about that. Had he not come to WSU, had Coach Leach not, tell him, "Hey, how about come and play for us instead of going to Alabama and being on the bench? Come play for us and lead the country in passing." And Coach Leach delivered for him. So Gardner, to this day, he thinks Washington State's a special place for all the right reasons. Same things that, get me going. So he gets it. So I got Brian, Drew, Luke,
Jason.
and Jason, and gosh, the fifth person. One of my all-time favorites. And is my best recruit, Mark Ribbon.
There you go.
Yeah, I recruited him. It's funny because I was a senior and he was a senior. He was a junior in high school, but I knew all about Rick. And so I got to meet him, and I loved him from the first day. He was a great kid. So that's just my personal bias come through. And he didn't play in a passing offense, but and if he would have, he would have lit it up. So that's those are my thoughts.
All right. There.
That being said, Jabri, I love all my quarterbacks. Everyone is special. Connor, you got Connor. The list goes on and on and on and on. Now I'll be with. Sorry, he threw that ball all over the place.
Oh yeah, Anthony Gordon did it too.
Hey, Gordon was special. Jeff Toole, I remember when he's a freshman, oh my gosh, you're just coming out with great names, great people. And that's the thing I like about our QBs, aside from being, we have our exceptions, but by and large, those quarterbacks that play for Washington State are good guys.
Very. All right. Here's another challenging one for you. I think I know where you're going to go with this, but I have to ask. Do you prefer the script Cougar logo on the side of the helmet or the actual Coug logo? So what you got behind you or the classical Cougs?
Well, the script is in my heart and my head. The best one is that the logo. Because that logo, I told you earlier, that logo is worth a ton. That's worth more than that gold W. Think about it. Come on. It's iconic in the collegiate world. So you got to go with that. And then, just out of respect, the Cougar logo, by the way, the Cougar script, who came up with that? Bob Leahy. So when Jackie Sherrill came to Pullman, he said, I see that W behind you, right? The old one I wore when I was a freshman. And he said, that's Bud Ugly. So he told Bob, give me something different because we're changing our uniforms. and that's when we went all white behind me. And then for our home uniforms, we got the crimson top and brand new uniforms. It was awesome. But Bob Leahy was thinking, what do I do? And you remember Pitt has the script,
Yeah.
right? He said, let's do a script, Cougars, similar to Pitt, but better looking.
Go Winter.
And that's how he was the one that came up with that.
And it looks amazing. So now I have to ask, we've had 2 iterations of Wazoo on the side of the helmet. We had the oversized one that was kind of a cursive font, with the red helmet, and then we had the Anthrax helmet with the Wazoo in block letters. Which one did you prefer?
I hate them both. Yeah. That's just me. You ask me a question, I'll be I don't like 'em. I love Wazoo because that's the essence of us, I mean, we're all Wazoo, right? But doesn't look good for me on uniform. Either that script or that, our logo.
I like it. Honest answers. What is your favorite uniform combination? Are you just the classical crimson, gray? And then I have to ask, are you a fan of the new kind of red they went with, or are you more of the throwback? I believe it was like early 2000s and late 2000s, that tint of crimson.
Well, prior to the recent years, my favorite uniform was the one behind me, the all white, and it was just new. You didn't see that, in college football for that matter. It just looked clean. And now I I love that our white helmets, our crimson jerseys and white pants. You know, I don't know. For me, it just pops. And I also like that crimson metallic helmet.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be going nuts playing nowadays because of all the different uniform combinations. I think it's great if you can afford it. And that's another issue altogether. But
Kids love them. And they
these lovers, that's right, recruit lovers. I get that.
exactly. All right, I got 5 questions for you here at the end that we like to ask everyone. So you're up to get just 5 questions.
Fire away.
Okay. So you're at a gas station. You're about to go on a long road trip. What's your go-to snack and your go-to drink?
Oh, snack is Fritos. Plain Fritos and go to drink. Yeah, it's really weird. I used to be Pepsi or a Coke guy. Now I just go. I just love the bubbly. It's a lot. It's a lot healthier. You know, I can't drink a full Coke anymore. Just my age, I guess. And then, or the other one too is M&M peanuts.
Yes, it's a good one.
I get those by the big plastic butter jars out of Costco.
I work at Costco wholesale at the corporate office.
You know what I'm talking about? We're the one that trained us.
Who's your favorite athlete of all time?
My favorite athlete of all time. Two of them, and I'll settle with one. Dr. J and Joe Willie Namath. Joe Willie, I tried to emulate his throwing, his quick release. I just remember seeing him on Johnny Carson one night, and he was describing how he throws the ball. And I said, I could do that. I could do that. I don't know if I ever quite did it like he did, but Dr. J, because when I saw him play, I remember watching him, and he had that wild throw, and he was playing the ABA, and he had that red, white, blue basketball, and he had pong. He was doing things that I'd never seen before. Then when he went to the Philadelphia 76ers, lights out.
He was good.
He was good.
What's your favorite time of the year? Now, football season, I think, is nice and easy to pick, but if it wasn't football season,
Spring football. Yeah, I love. I enjoy myself. Not that I live in Spokane, to go down to Pullman to watch spring football. I enjoy that.
that's awesome. Who's your favorite sports team at the high school, college, and pro level? But you can't pick anywhere you've played, otherwise it would be too easy.
Oh man, could you run that by me one more time?
Your favorite sports team at the high school, college, and pro level?
Okay. Favorite high school team, Kahuku in Hawaii football. Okay. The things that they've done over the years special. That's a factory. And without the means that other high schools have. College, I'll have to go with Stanford. I've always liked what they stood for, with the exception of what they did this year, or, post Pac-12. I thought they were smarter than that. But, unfortunately, I think their academic arrogance got in the way. They can stand some humility. Just my thoughts. Professionally, oh no, I was gonna say Cincinnati, but not where I'm playing, huh? Okay, so it's a toss up between San Francisco, the 49ers, and Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, if I say Pittsburgh Steelers, I'll be disowned by all the Cincinnati Bengals. That's, that was our rival. But I got to tell you, I love Terry Bradshaw. Terry, I always enjoyed him. And then, so I'll go with the 49ers, you know, Joe Montana, Steve Young. And then my favorite 49er of all time is Jesse Sapola. He's their 4-time champion, starting center, and belongs in the Pro Football Hall of Fame. He really does. And he is the guy that created, who thought up the Polynesian Football Hall of Fame. And boy, has that enterprise, that franchise, it is blown up in the last 6-7 years. So, yeah.
All right. And then we got the last question. There's a guy named Luke Combs, makes a lot of country music. He has a song called Doing This. I like it because the opening line goes, someone asked me once in an interview, what was growing up like? Where'd you go to school? And what would you do if you weren't doing this? So my question to you is, throw away football to the side, throw away your investment managing and everything you've done. What would you be doing if you weren't doing what you've done?
But he could have been playing sports, right?
Yeah.
Well, I would have been a baseball player. I was a pretty good one in my day. I got drafted my senior year. Here's a little known trivia. I got drafted my senior year out of Washington State. Last pick. I was Mr. Irrelevant for Seattle Mariners. I was their last pick in a 1979 draft.
Wow. Did you think about it for a month later?
But I will tell you that it helped me in closing my deal with Cincinnati Bengals. Because I was a holdout going into rookie, training camp, and Mike Brown, the son of Paul Brown, flew to Seattle to sign me. And I remember Carl Lopez. Remember I was talking about Carl Lopez, my attorney friend. He called me into his office, and so I was sitting there with Mike Brown and Keith Lincoln, my yeah my mentor in Washington State. Keith was there too. He was helping with the negotiations, and so I was sitting there with those three, and Mike Brown said something, and I said, I really right now I don't feel good about the direction this thing's going. I might just sit out this year and go try my luck with the Seattle Mariners. Yeah, and I think that moved the needle because we ended up signing 2 hours later.
That is a little bit of
And,
trivia.
and the next morning, Mike and I were on a plane heading back to Cincinnati for rookie camp. So, yeah,
That's a good one.
this has been a fun interview, Joffrey. Thank you very much.
Of course.